Good evening. Welcome to Burnham Podcast. I'm your host, Danny Burnham. Um, Tonight, I just want to talk about pro athletes related to pro athletes in the news that don't necessarily have to do with other 3-point shots or home runs or anything like that. But I want to talk a little bit about some good things these guys are doing. They get a lot of heat for typical stuff that pro athletes get heat for. But there's several guys that I want to talk about, and I'll start. Whoa, actually, man, I almost jumped right over my sponsor, Mustard Seed Soap Shop. If you're looking for soap, bath bombs, sugar scrubs, pillow sprays, anything that will make you cleaner and or smell better, Mustard Seed Soap Shop is your place to get it. They are an online retailer. They um, their website is mustardseedsoap.com. I'm doing this podcast super late. Bear with me. But mustard seed soap, they're your place to go to get what you need to make yourself smell better, make your wife happy. Guys, there's stuff for you on their website too. Again, that's mustardseedsoap.com. Go check them out on Facebook, like them, follow them, all that good stuff. Look for them out in the community if you're in the Rome, Georgia area. They frequent arts and crafts festivals and things like that too, so you may be able to see them face to face there. But like them, buy stuff from them. They're awesome. It will make your life better. I promise. Thanks to Mustard Seed Soap Shop for sponsoring the show. So speaking of shows, tonight I was watching the Pro Football Hall of Fame induction, and I wouldn't have watched it. I don't even have cable at my house. I was next door to my parents' house. My dad had it on TV, and I was over there for a few minutes. I think it was to retrieve my son, which is a pretty regular thing. He spends a lot of time over there. But I'm watching, and I caught most of Brian Dawkins' speech. Brian Dawkins played safety for the Philadelphia Eagles for many years and is going to obviously go down as one of the greats to ever play the game. But in his speech, Mr. Dawkins, I call it a speech. My man, like, put down a sermon. Okay. He was having church up on the stage. And you could tell when he, like, really nailed a point because the audience kind of was like, "Ooh, should I, like, clap for that? Or do we, I mean, because this is, football and this guy, I mean, but he was going to church for real. He talked about the the hand of God in his life and the way that God worked to get him from where he was and how he started and where he grew up to Pro Football Hall of Fame. And he was all about giving God the glory. And he shouted out, everybody in his family, everybody that had ever um, assisted him or advised him or helped him in any way, shape, or form. And it was great to see that. He was giving back. And in doing that, he and other guys too, for that matter, were like basically pulling these other people up on stage with them. And it was really cool to watch. To but it kept coming back to glory to God, glory to God, glory to God. And we see athletes say that a lot. And after they've won the championship or the big game, or they're the interview at the game where they hit the big shot or score the winning touchdown or whatever, and they go, first and foremost, I want to give thanks to the big man upstairs or him who makes all things possible. And that's kind of where they leave it. They drop it there a lot of times and they go on a different tirade or whatever. But he kept coming back to God, kept coming back to glory to God and honoring God and following God and listening to God and all these signs that God had his hand in his life, from point A to point B and got him to where he is now. It was God's divine influence and God's presence in their family and God got it all day long. It was really cool, his whole speech. And I mean, he's working up a sweat. And I don't know, I didn't follow his career a lot not because, I'm not an Eagles fan and I don't like Brian Dawkins or whatever, but I'm just not, I don't follow NFL football like a lot of people do. It's just not my thing. I don't have anything against them. Just not my thing. But based on what I heard him say tonight, the guy's got an incredible testimony, and a lot of people heard that now. People there in attendance, thousands of people in this stadium, and then of course millions of people watching on television, and that will see it later on in rebroadcast, and I'm sure it's probably on YouTube already and things like that. But this guy's just going on and on and on about the influence of God in his life and the importance of his family and love and all these things. And I thought that was really cool because again, you don't get that a lot of times out of pro athletes. They're so in the moment that, especially right after a game, they want to talk about the game, and I get it. Not that there's no slight against anybody in that, but they want to focus on the right now, and God is kind of a thing that a lot of times they throw out there, and then they go away from that and go on and talk about the game and the sport and whatever they got going on. But again, he kept coming back to that, and it was really cool. And now it moved me, like it really did. And then Randy Moss gets up, and I didn't necessarily follow Randy Moss, in his career. I know that, he's one of the greatest to ever play the game at his position or any position. Randy Moss he's just great. He's phenomenal. Wasn't always the best example of character, and he owned that in his speech. And he talked about learning from his mistakes and things like that. But again, he kept coming back to God and the hand of God in his life. If you know anything about Randy Moss, he came from a little place called Rand, West Virginia, and he mentioned it several times in his speech tonight. Not answer calls there, like it's bad. It's a rough place to grow up. He talked on and on about the fact that his mom drug him to church and instilled these things in him from a young age. He said that 7 days a week they were at church 7 times, and he said they even tried to sneak an 8th day in there sometimes. But his mom just constantly dragging him to church and having him involved in these things. And we know, and like I said, he owned it. So I don't feel bad talking about it now, but he made his share of mistakes. He was not what we think of as a character guy, and especially in the early parts of his career. He had a lot of flaws as far as his character goes, and we saw him grow and mature later on. He kind of ironed some of those things out. But really tonight, and I've heard him speak other times since he retired, and it's obvious that he's a different person than he was when he was 22 years old. Of course he is. We all are. Like I couldn't tell you how different I am from, now from when I was 22 years old, and I didn't come from the kind of background that he came from. The place that he lived, the place that he grew up. There's no hope there. There's nothing to look forward to. You live in this little place, and your lights are getting shut out, and you don't know when or if you're going to get to eat again. And that's the upbringing he had. I can't relate to that. I had a better situation than that growing up, but in spite of that, he got to where he is now, and he attributed all that back to God and God's influence in his life and the hand of God in his life. And even when he wasn't doing the right things and living the way he should be living, he knew, in his mind that he needed to get back and get right with God, because that's what his mom had instilled with him. So you get into the train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he'll not depart from it. And he's living that now. He's living what his parents, what his mom instilled in him from an early age. And that was really cool to see. And, it's easy to look and say, well, I wish he had started doing that when he was, 22. And, well, man, he's got a pretty good testimony, now that he lived that part of his life too, and strayed away from God and did all the things that we saw him do. And he was hard to get along with, and he, caused a lot of drama in the locker room, the teams he was with. But here he is now, and he can look back and he can say, don't do the things that I did, and I know that because I did them. I lived that. I went down some of those wrong paths, and I lived to tell the tale. He got through it, but looking back now, he knows it was because God was guiding his steps the whole way. And again, he just kept coming back to God, kept coming back to God. These guys were just preaching sermons up on stage. So it was just awesome to see that. And again, so there were times the crowd was just dumbfounded at some of the things they would say. And I was, and like I said, these guys were just moving me. And I don't know that anybody, I wasn't ready. I'd forgotten that I saw the names of all the guys that were being inducted the other day. And again, I hadn't planned on watching it. I just kind of happened onto it. But now I don't believe that it was a coincidence. There's no such thing as coincidence as far as that goes. God placed me where I was at so I could see this, and now I'm doing a podcast about it. But Ray Lewis, I'd forgotten that his name was on the list, and I'm not going to pretend that Ray Lewis hasn't had his ups and downs, in his life. He's had some dark times, and if you followed his career at all, you know that. But we serve a forgiving God, and we are commanded ourselves to forgive. And even the religious aspect aside from that, Ray Lewis went to trial, okay, for the crimes that were alleged against him. And in our country, when you're not guilty, that means you're not guilty. So the court finds Ray Lewis not guilty, innocent, whatever the verdict was. He didn't do it, okay. And you believe whatever you want to believe, and that's fine. But also keep in mind that the first time Saul appeared in the Bible, in the New Testament, Saul that became Paul, the first time he appeared in the Bible, he was holding everybody's coat so they could stone Stephen to death. Okay, he did that, like, for sure. Like, Ray Lewis might have been a part of this other thing, maybe, possibly, even probably, I don't know. Saul definitely was part of Stephen being murdered, okay, and then we saw how his life turned out to be. So we look at Ray Lewis in terms of forgiveness. And that was what I was thinking when he walked out on the stage. And I was like, that was a long time ago. And maybe, he's a different person now. And I haven't heard much from him or about him even since he retired from football. But he gets out there, and within the first couple of minutes, these guys are all thanking people. Thank my old coach and my mom and my, whoever, my high school counselor and the guy down the street and, everybody, people that influenced their lives. So Ray Lewis starts out almost immediately thanking his biological father and offering forgiveness to his biological father, who was an absentee father. He wasn't there. He was not part of Ray's life. He wasn't around. But he talked about forgiving him and thanking him for bringing him into this world. And, we see so many of these guys. Well, like Randy Moss, his dad wasn't around. He came from a single parent, and he just didn't really mention it. But Ray Lewis forgives his biological father for not being around, and there's a lot of these guys that are in that same boat that may not offer the same forgiveness. But based on his speech tonight, it seems like Ray Lewis knows who God is, because he went back. He's talking about forgiveness, of his absentee father, and love. He talks so much about love. He plugged love, man, like forever. He quoted Martin Luther King Jr., that said that unarmed love is the most powerful force in the universe, and there's nothing stronger or greater than love. And he talked about unity and things that he's into now that his career is over. Like, still using his influence. He's still got a huge sphere of influence. Like, when Ray Lewis starts talking, people listen. And he knows that, and he understands that, and he challenged other Hall of Fame football players who were in attendance and, were watching, of course, on TV or whatever, to use their influence and push for unity in our country. And there's so much craziness going on in our country these days. It just, it seems like there's something new every day that divides people. and we're drawing lines in the sand, and I'm on this side and you're on that side, and we hate each other because of X, Y, and Z, or whatever the case may be. But he's challenging these guys to use their voice and use their influence in unity and loving your neighbor. And he starts talking about loving your neighbor and how important it is to love each other and walk in that love and forgive people. And he talks about not just loving each other, but encouraging others to love each other too. And it's good, to live by example. We talk about in the church and things, we talk about living by example. And that's good. That's a great thing. We should all live by example, like definitely 100%. But, the example only goes so far. You'll win some people over with your example, and that's cool. That's good. But to outwardly, like actively encourage other people to follow that example. We mentioned Paul a second ago. Like, Paul did that. Follow me because I'm following Jesus. So it wasn't just his example that he was putting out there. He was encouraging other people to do the same thing as him. And that's what we have to do. That's what we're supposed to do. We're not just supposed to live by example and hope for the best. Like, that's not always going to be good enough. Probably more times than not, it's not going to be good enough. It'll get you respect. He's a good guy. He loves his neighbor, whatever. But for us to encourage others to walk in that same love and to share that same love with others, that's what it's supposed to be. That's what we're supposed to be doing. And that was his message, and he preached that just over and over and over again, and loving each other, and the way that he loved his kids and the sacrifices that he made in his careers, and all these guys, pointed this stuff out. And the time they were away, and these guys asked, forgiveness for their kids for, they're not around. Professional athletes travel, and a lot of times you don't live in the same city that you play in, and family situations and whatever. But these guys were different. Like I said, I don't know Brian Dawkins as well. There was a bigger spotlight, I think, on Ray Lewis and Randy Moss. A lot of times it was because they asked for it, but for whatever reason, these guys, I'm a little more familiar with them. And I just, based on what we'd seen early in their careers, earlier in their lives, you wouldn't have expected them to say a lot of the things that they were saying today. And at the same time, we look at pro athletes, and these guys are obviously retired, and they're not, active pro athletes anymore. But they haven't been retired that long. They're still relevant, and they're still guys that they played with that are in the league, and they still have influence, and people still listen to what they say. So, it was just awesome to hear these. It'd been one thing if Brian Dawkins had gotten up there and delivered what basically amounted to a sermon, and that would have been cool. But for Randy Moss to come behind him, and then for Ray Lewis to come behind him and really affirm, those points that Brian Dawkins made about God and the influence of God and, the blessings of God and all those things, that would say something that'd say something to me, if I didn't know who God was, but I respected, these guys as great athletes, then, well, man, it wasn't just the one guy, but the three of them got up there. And these are the only three that I saw. I don't know what the other guys said. They might have thrown, similar fireball sermons. I don't know. But for one guy to get up there would have been cool. But for the other guys to get up behind him and just drive those points home was really cool. And it says a lot. And I think it will. I mean, it touched me like it really did. I was moved to tears a couple times. Some of the stuff these guys said, man, with the places they came from and the hardships they endured, and the strength to endure those hardships coming from God. And even though these guys weren't always the best people, they knew who God was and they knew what he was about. And he was always, at least in the back of their head, even when they weren't being who they were supposed to be. And again, that's a testament to a single mom who drags her kids to church, or, somebody who steps into the life of a kid that needs some kind of positive influence. I work in public school, so it was really cool to see these guys get up and think they're high school coaches and teachers and, and things like that. And, what you think about what a positive, what a good thing it is to be able to be a positive role model for kids that don't have positive role models in their lives. And to think that somebody that you're influencing now as a really young person, whether you're a teacher or not, it could be a kid in your neighborhood or your church or whatever, but you're influencing this kid, you're making an impression on him and you're pointing him toward God. One day he could be on stage in Canton, Ohio, being inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He could be, the doctor that cures cancer. He could be the president of the United States. And he gets to where he's at because of something you said or something you did 30 years before that, and it's the adults, the people that have positive influences in our lives, their words stick in our head. Like I can hear things that people told me when I was little about, how smart I was or how talented I was or whatever. And I think about those things now, you know, 30, 35 years later, when I sit down to write an article or I'm planning a podcast or I'm doing whatever I'm doing, I think about a time that, Mr. Smith, my technology teacher in high school, said, "Hey, you're really good in front of the camera. You ought to do, so and so and such and such." And people that, read my papers, like English teachers and things in school that say, "Hey, you're pretty good at this writing thing. You ought to look into that." But, think about those people, and I'm sure you do too, the people that influenced you. And, but even as Christians, it's even so much more important for us to include the influence of God in these people's lives when you're whether and it can even be your kids. Don't leave your kids out. Make sure you're pointing your own kids in the right direction too. Maybe it's not even a kid. Maybe it's somebody, who's in the same stage in his life you're in and they just don't know God. Be the example, that they can see God in you. That's what we're supposed to do. That's how it's supposed to be, and these guys allowed God to be seen through them tonight on this stage. As far as being somebody of positive influence to some kids, LeBron James, man, I don't know if you guys are following his story with his I Promise Academy. He's opened up a school in Akron, Ohio, which is where he's from, and it's going to start with, I believe it's third and fourth grade. And then over the next few years, he's going to expand out and add second and fifth, and then first and sixth. And before you know it, he's going to go first through eighth grade at this school. And he's guaranteeing college tuition for all these kids that graduate from this school. And it's just, it's awesome place. It's geared for at-risk kids, and not just at-risk kids from Canton, but from these kids are all from schools that the state of Ohio has given an F to as far as, how well they're doing as a school as a whole. So the kids are at risk and they came from bad schools. So it wasn't, a lot of times we see these charter schools and these things start up and they pick kids out of these failing schools or whatever. But odds are the kid is pretty bright and has good grades and good test scores and all these things. And they kind of handpick these kids. Well, LeBron's school was public. So it's not like they can say, no, little Tommy, your test scores aren't high enough to get in here. Like he's taking, it's the real deal. He's taking real at-risk kids from real terrible schools. Akron is one of the lowest performing, not the school system as a whole, but their lowest performing kids are way lower than average. It's really bad. Their at-risk kids are just off the charts as far as how poorly they're performing in school. And, when you look at that, I'm not going to point fingers at their teachers and things like that, obviously, because, some school systems are equipped with things that others aren't. And I don't know what Akron's up against, who knows? And you got their at-risk kids. And a lot of times those kids aren't getting support at home. They're not getting help with their homework. They might not have enough to eat, or decent clothes to wear, and somebody getting them up, making them get on the bus. So they're missing school. But, LeBron is out here and he's doing his best to make all that stuff happen. And I don't know why. I haven't seen religious affiliation attached to it. Again, it's a public school that he's just kind of underwriting and putting some most all, the financial backing into to get it going. Apparently he's sunk like $8 million into this thing. But, but he's doing this because he was that kid. I think it said he missed 83 days of school or something. And when he was in fourth grade, and somebody got hold of him and was like, "Hey, LeBron, you're going to be somebody one day." And they didn't give up on him, and they pushed him and they pressured him until he performed up to his level. And you see where he's at now. We're having, we used to look at 4 or 5 guys who could be the greatest basketball players of all time. And now we're kind of looking at 2, it's either LeBron or it's Jordan. He's 50% of those guys. So somebody believed in him, and now he may be the greatest to ever play the game. And there's plenty of knocks on LeBron. There's plenty of, people hate on him because he went out of the game with cramps one time, and he whines at the referee, and he flops, and he does this and he does that, and that's, whatever. It is what it is. But I'll tell you what, we haven't seen. We haven't seen news of LeBron having extramarital affairs. He doesn't have a bunch of illegitimate kids running around. He didn't have a gambling problem. He's never been busted for drugs. There's so many things, so many vices and traps that these guys fall into as pro athletes. And you got millions of dollars and, drugs and stuff on demand, and women throwing themselves at you in every city you travel to. And, but you have, we read that about a lot of these guys. So-and-so got busted for dope, cocaine. He's got prostitutes. He's got 11 kids with 9 baby mamas, whatever. We don't see that about LeBron. He's married to his mother, his kid's mother. And, as far as we know, there hasn't been anybody else. He's not running around, like so many of these guys do. So, say what you want about LeBron on the floor. I get it. You can't hate him too much. The guy puts the shit in the basket at the end of the day. But character-wise, you look at this guy, and there's no room to throw stones because he looks like the whole picture. And again, I don't know what his religious affiliations are, things like that. But to start a school to reach these kids that somebody else can go there unreachable. That's an act of love, and it didn't get any more loving than that, is to do something for somebody that he doesn't know these kids. Maybe he's met some of them and he's been to the school and high-fived them on the first day and stuff like that, but he didn't know these kids. He's not going to, it's not people that live next door to him. They don't live in his neighborhood. He's probably he lives in a gated community or whatever, but he's not in the same neighborhood, but that's where he came from. That's what he knows, and that's what he understands. And he knows that, man, I wish I'd had this opportunity when I was coming up. So now he wants to give that to somebody else. So he's using his influence. And thank God that he didn't just shut up and play ball. And I've said that before. I wish so-and-so would just shut up and play ball. I wish would shut up and make movies or just sing the songs or whatever. These guys have influence. And just because we don't agree with them all the time, when people speak out on politics and things like that, that doesn't mean they should. This is still America. Those people still have a right to say whatever they want to say. If you don't like what a person's saying, don't buy tickets to his concert or don't go to his movies or his ball games or whatever, why ever he's famous. The cool part about First Amendment is nobody's got to listen. So if you don't like it, don't go. Don't buy the ticket. But we shouldn't be telling these people to shut up either, because these 4 guys that I've mentioned tonight, if they had just shut up, especially LeBron now, he's influencing 240 people's lives, as of Monday. Like, some of these lives are going to change and they're going to be different forever because of his generosity and what he did. So thank God he didn't just shut up and dribble. And and there's haters. There's haters. There's haters in sometimes in the highest office in the land, I don't want to get into like politics or whatever, but sometimes we just got to tune out the outside noise, and why put attention on the hater in this situation when we can give it all to the guy who's doing the right thing here and doing the good thing, and that's obviously is LeBron. We high five to that guy. God bless him. Um, like I said, there's plenty of reasons that people have found to knock him, but his character has never been one of them. And obviously now, he's scoring even a little higher in that department. So there's something to be said for that. But God bless them. God bless these guys. God, thank God that Ray Lewis and Randy Moss and Brian Dawkins didn't just get on stage tonight and give their own bust a hug and shout out to their homies or whatever and walk off the stage. Thank God they stayed up there and said the things that they did. Because who knows how many millions of people heard that tonight? Millions of people, and who knows, it could have changed somebody's life. So, don't give up on the pro athlete. They've got their downfalls. They got their shortcomings. They are bigger and faster and stronger than 99% of the population, but they're still 100% human and 100% prone to error. So, take, look at that however you want to look at it, but don't give up on them yet. You may not agree with them all the time. You may not be interested in what they have to say, but we need to still be interested in their right to say it. Even the First Amendment protects even speech that we don't agree with. So, keep that in mind next time you're getting mad about what a celebrity saying, a pro athlete, a singer, or whatever. But in terms of this discussion, we're talking about pro athletes. But just keep that in mind. And if you don't agree with them, again, that's great. But they've got the right. And if their employer, doesn't mind them saying, one thing or another and one on one side or the other, then God bless them. More power to them. We don't have the right really to tell. I mean, I guess we have the right to tell somebody to shut up as much as they have the right to say what they're saying, but it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense because we don't do that when they agree with us. If those guys had got up there on stage tonight and espoused some other religion and started, on their principles, then I got to stop and think, would that make me mad? Would I still be doing this podcast tonight about this subject? Maybe not, but this is America. We live in a pretty cool country, and those guys have got the right to get up and say things like that. But thank God that they said what they did, and they didn't just shut up and make it about themselves or about that moment. And again, hopefully some lives were changed. Thank God for LeBron and his new school. Kudos to that guy, man. I mean, I don't know how many guys could have done that, but just haven't. He did. This is a goal. Apparently, it's been a goal of his for a long time now. But and people talk about he's not loyal because he left Cleveland again. He's going to LA. I'll be real with you guys. I work at a school right now, but if the school across town called me and offered me 10 times the money or whatever, if I can give a better life to my kids by going and taking this other job, it's not that I don't love the place I work now, but that's where we got to look at it, and that's how he's looking at it. So I can't really hate on him for that either. But again, especially tonight, I'm a LeBron fan now as far as that goes, based on what he's done. I just think it's awesome. But again, don't give up on these guys. There's some good ones out there. Some of them, they're not there yet, and some of them are coming around. Again, think back to young Randy Moss. He wasn't, he wasn't the example of character that we always think of, but he's come around, and now he's influencing people for the right reasons. And so is Ray Lewis and Brian Dawkins and all these guys, and it's great. It really is great. But don't give up on these guys. They're coming around. They're still out there. There are active players. Again, these guys, they're retired, but they're still active guys that hold these same beliefs, and that's important. It's a big deal. And these guys using their voice tonight gives these other guys a platform. And when it's their turn to go into the hall, they can give similar speeches, but they can also be doing it in the meantime. So that's cool too. But that's what I got for you guys tonight. I say tonight. It's late here. It's 12:15 Eastern time. But I don't know. You watch it when you watch it, I guess. I've learned since I started doing this podcast thing, you got to do a podcast when you can do a podcast. So we're doing it right now. But thank you guys for watching. If you are listening, whichever one you're doing, if you want to find me on social media, I am at Danny J. Burnham on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can follow Fire Christian Media at Fire Christian Media on Facebook. Also, firechristianmedia.com. We're almost there. We're almost there. I'm the official web designer, and I'm terrible at it, so it's a slow crawl. But we almost got our website going again. So check that out pretty soon. Don't forget to check out Mustard Seed Soap Shop, Facebook, mustardseedsoap.com. They got an Etsy store. Buy things from them. Anyway, thank you guys for listening. Don't give up on pro athletes. God hasn't given up on them yet. Thank you guys. God bless.